This episode of The Nobody Guide to Life is part of a special series called Hosting the Hosts. Our guests in this series are podcast and radio hosts who were gracious enough to have me on their shows to talk about the Nobody Bible and the concept of nobody. They all have interesting shows and stories of their own, and I've asked them to share them with you. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to The Nobody Guide to Life, where we provide tips and tools for personal growth, personal development, and your spiritual journey that you can use right now in your everyday life. I'm J.A. Plosker. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you here. You can always find out more at nobodiesview.com or thenobodybible.com, or you can check us out at Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's View, or you can join the Facebook group Simple Spirituality. If you like what you hear on the show, we'd welcome a subscription or a review. We'd appreciate it. The path of personal growth and spiritual development can be exciting, really exciting, and it can also be a lot of fun. And according to my guest today, it can be full of joy potential, but it also takes discipline. And that's where my guest really shines. Robert Sharpe is the founder of BiteRadio.me and is the host and producer of the Bringing Inspiration to Earth radio show. He's logged almost 1,300 episodes. He's also the author of Joy Potential, Where You'd Least Expect It, It's No Secret, Spirituality Bites, Nature's Inspiration, Volume 1, and the newly released The Heart and Soul of Caring, The Joys and Challenges of Being a Caregiver. Robert gives a voice to inspirational guests in self-help and spirituality and is passionate about his work, which includes self-publishing and public relations support. So thank you for joining us, Robert.
Good day, J.A. Thank you very much. It is truly a pleasure to be here, and congratulations on the launch of your podcast. That is great.
Thank you. For my listeners, I was actually on Bringing Inspiration to Earth, and it was just really a wonderful experience. And I knew that when I launched my podcast, I would really want to have Robert on my show. He's got a really impressive resume. So, Robert, 1,300 episodes.
I know. I find, and I wasn't even sure if I was gonna get past 10 when I started.
I just can't even. So you tape, how many days a week are you taping?
I do 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Wow. Find so many people. I mean, it's just incredible. That's such an unbelievable number of shows. Where do all these people come from?
Well, it started out really kind of me just going out and, looking for people. I kind of specialize in the self-help, spirituality, and a couple other genres like environmental awareness, and I have a special children's corner with children's authors. Oh. But over the years, it's just past 7 years, almost not 8 now. But over the years, I've really developed some pretty strong relationships with about anywhere between 6 to 10 publicists, and they're wonderful. They know my lane, and whenever they have an author who publishes a book, they just send me a pitch and say, hey, I think this is a good one for you. And so luckily now, I just kind of have it sit back and, people send them to me and, and I say yes or no, and we go from there.
I love it. How many years have you been on?
It'll be 8 years in October. So, yeah.
Wow.
Like I said, when I started, I really wasn't even sure, if it was going to work. And then, 1 year after another, and it's grown. And it's wonderful because I really also have a lot of guests from different countries. And so it's kind of built up my global presence in a way that, a lot of followers of those people in the various countries end up subscribing to the show. So, it's pretty strong in several major countries, and every now and then a country will pop up on my demographic and I'm like, whoa, where did that one come from? Like Slovenia. Who knew?
Right. I think that's great. Can you, that's something I'd really like to dig into, because it's so exciting when I read your bio to see, where you are, but to really dig back into where it came from. When did you decide that this is what you wanted? To have a radio show that's been on for so long and so many guests, but where did it all start? What was that moment of, personal growth, spiritual growth? Where was that moment where you knew that this was something you could do, or at least something you could try?
Well, radio started about 15 years ago. A friend of mine, I was living in Las Vegas, and a friend of mine was offered a show of his own, sponsored by one of the casinos out there. And he needed support for the production and lining up of guests. So very much I was behind the scenes with that radio. And it was, typical broadcast. It was an internet-based radio. So, I mean, basically that was where I got my start. Now, every now and then, he would have a guest not show up. And of course, on broadcast radio, you kind of have to go with the flow. So I ended up being the guest, and we just kind of had a dialogue. And back in that day, I would, record the show just, to be able to play back and see what we could do to improve. And when I heard my voice, J.A., I was like, oh, Lord, that I am so glad I'm behind the scenes here, And so anyway, kind of fast forward, I had thought that I would really, in 2010, that I'd really like to put together a network of shows. Again, I would not be the host, but I would kind of, be, like I did before, behind the scenes. And then about, it was October of 2010, the domain company that I use for my websites indicated that there was the .me. And the idea of, having a radio show with a .me, with the idea of bringing inspiration to earth is the acronym, so I thought BITE, no. And that was, of course, already taken. So I did, the BITE radio .me. But, what happened is, I went and grabbed the domain. And then I started, putting together a plan for that network of people. And what I found was that, I really didn't want to have to rely on hosts to be interested in what they're doing and getting guests. And it got down to, well, the only way to avoid that is for me to be the host. And it's like, and again, that idea of hearing my own voice kind of kept, that running through my head. And then it just, I just had that little thread say, you know what? Get over it, just do it. Right. And, if it works, great. And if it doesn't, fine. No big loss. And so that's what I did. I kind of took that leap, and started. And then, each week I started off with once a week, and that worked out great. And I started getting different guests, and again started aligning with publicists and publishers, and then there was one year, and I think it was 2015. I thought, let me see, and I was getting a lot of guests. So I was thinking, let me see if I can do every day, Monday through Friday.
Wow.
So I set myself the challenge to do that, and I actually did. For 1 year, I did 5 days a week. But then after that, I thought, okay, I could do that, but I don't want to do that. So then I kind of scaled back to 3 times a week. Because one of the things I really take pride in is that if I have an author on my show, I read the book, because to me, it gives us such a better quality interview. And when I was doing 5 days a week, I really couldn't do that, to the quality. Right. So that's why I kind of skipped back to 3 days a week.
So this is really interesting, because your journey was a series of, can I do it? Yes, I can. And then pushing yourself to do it even more, and then making conscious decisions to scale back and to focus on areas that you really wanted to build up. And I really want to know from you, how was it that how did you decide that you wanted to do self-help and spirituality? Because it really seems like so much of your decisions around this were so conscious. How was it that you decided on those genres to focus on?
Well, the spirituality aspect was, that was just an area that I had a lot of knowledge and interest in. That's the kind of books I read. That's the kind of the circle of people that I was in. And so, that one seemed to be an easy, way to go, because it was, the people were there, the books were there, so that part. And then the self-help, my degree is in psychology. So when I decided, actually way back in the years, to decided to what I was going to do in college, in life, I picked psychology because I thought, I'm going to be spending all of this money, and what I want to get out of that is to know myself better. And I figured, whatever I do with it later on is fine and dandy. But, the whole thrust of that particular focus was getting to know myself better. So that's kind of where the self-help came in.
So I think one of your books is actually about this journey, isn't it? Wasn't Joy Potential? Doesn't that give the story about how a lot of this came
Yes,
to
sir.
be?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yeah, Joy Potential was the first book, and it was basically I walk every day. That's my little moment of zen. Every day, I just kind of start my day by
Right.
walking, and one day the idea for Joy Potential just kind of popped into my head, and actually the ending popped in before anything else.
Right.
So and yeah, and Joy Potential it's really well. I use the term faction. I had a gentleman from Australia who wrote his book, and he used the term faction, which was facts, surrounded by fiction.
Right.
So that's what Joy Potential is. It's my journey, in a sense, of the radio show, and a lot of it had to do around the fears of doing the show, of reaching out, of connecting with people, and it really showed in the Joy Potential the real meat is that after going through all of and facing those fears and going through all of that, the joy that can be the result can be so much far greater than you expect.
Well, can you take us down that? That's such an important topic, and I think for our listeners and for me, as the host of the show, this idea around fears, and we know we have a goal, and we know we have something we want to achieve, but those fears crop up. What was that? What did that look like for you when you were just starting out? What did the fears look like? What did you use to motivate you to climb those hills or to get around those obstacles? How did you deal with that?
Well, I think the of course, the first fear again was overcoming the idea of hearing my voice, and so
right.
I overcame that by not listening to my show when I was like a lot of actors who don't watch their films.
Right.
So that one was solved. That was easy. But after that, it's really about not having, first of all, not having attachment to a specific outcome. And then the other one is that recognizing that quote failure is really just a perspective. I mean, I went through a lot of. There were times when I would, because I get statistics, so there were times I would look at shows that just had especially in the beginning, really low listenership, and it was like, oh man, why am I doing this? And then I had a woman on the show, and this was another one. Her book was about how marrying a sociopath kind of put her on her spiritual journey.
Wow, nice light topic.
I know, really. And I thought, when she sent me the information, it was like, whoa, do I really want to get into this? And it was one of those cases where my gut instinct said, thanks, but no thanks. But then I thought, well, let me just give it a try and see what happens. And we did the show, and because I knew someone who was actually, one of my friends was actually kind of going through a similar kind of situation. So I thought, well, yeah, this might benefit her. This woman might have something to say to her. And right. After that show is probably one of the shows that I've had the most feedback on after people listened to it, and it was women, who had gone through it, and the woman guest had on her website a wonderful reservoir of resources for women, and so after that point I stopped checking numbers. I mean, it's not about it wasn't about the numbers anymore. So the fear of who's going to listen or whatever, it really didn't matter. Whoever was meant to listen and benefit will, so that was kind of thing. So it's, as far as fears, it's, you can go ahead and do it. I mean, there are many times now that I've gone outside the box, so to speak,
right.
and done shows with guests that I absolutely knew nothing about. But it was like, okay, let's go there. A lot of my guests probably don't know about this, so let me, I can put myself in their spot and let's learn, and so that's kind of where that was at.
Well, I love that idea about learning together. When I came to you with, the Nobody Bible, it's like that word nobody is just staring people in the face, like, what is this? But you know what? It's fun to just explore. And I think that's part of, it's one of the great messages that, I'm trying to get out there more and more is, listen, just try. Now, I'm not, if things are dangerous,
Right.
that's
Right.
one thing. I'm not advocating that people, go and try to climb Everest their first time out of the gate. But you know what? If there's a rock wall in town, give it a try. So I like your story because it leads to so many things that are really scary for people. Contacting guests can be scary. I'm the producer of this show as well, so I have to reach out. You've written books and put yourself out there. You put your voice out there. Every time you have a guest on, you're putting yourself out there because you're learning from them. So your story is really inspiring. How did you get from that then to a book on caregiving? That's so interesting. Your newest book. How did you make that jump? Where did that come
Yeah,
from?
now that's interesting. Yeah, the caregiving book is right now. I mean, I just self-published it, and it's working its way through the distribution channels. But that particular
Right.
book, it was a waking dream that I had, and in that dream, it was, that I basically needed to do this book, and it would be a book of stories of caregivers.
Right.
The difference, the little tweak in this particular one was to really give focus and attention and honoring the care receivers. Because so many caregiver books really focus on the caregiver, what to do
Right.
and all the
Right.
challenges and joys. And my waking thought was, without that receiver, there would be no need for a caregiver. So,
Right.
and so many people, when it comes time to, be a caregiver, that, they really have a unique story. And so that was a waking dream that I had. And I thought, okay, let me start contacting people I know, who are caregivers, and see what the
Right.
response would be. And it took a while, a lot longer than I expected, to get the stories that I wanted. But actually the very first story that I received was from my sister, who was a caregiver for my mother, until the time she passed. And
Right.
my sister's story was riveting. I mean, I learned things about my mother's final days that I didn't know. Now, before she passed, we were estranged for a good 15, 20 years. And I had
Wow.
tried, to make contact to overcome that, but she was a stubborn Italian woman who, just did not want to cross that bridge. But in my sister's story, she mentions how she tried to get my mother to reconcile with me before passing many, many times. And that was my sister's only regret, that she wasn't able to successfully do that. But so,
Wow.
I mean, it was, there's that, and there's just a lot of different stories. The stories that I got were, really heartbreaking, but also very encouraging. I mean, there's that whole process of being a caregiver is challenging, but there's also a lot to be gained from it too. So that's kind of the story behind that book.
How much of you is in your work? Because I know some of your books are very personal, but sometimes it's hard with a radio show because it sounds like you have a host who's just kind of this, of course, not objective, but this objective
Right.
observer while the guest is talking. So when you think about that and you think about that amazing story, and, because you were collecting other people's stories, but there was one that was intimately
Right.
tied to you. When you think about your radio show and your authoring, how much of you is in that, would you say? I mean, you know what I
Yes,
mean?
yeah, I do. And I would say that, for the books, there's a lot of me. I mean, with the Joy Potential, obviously, it was my story, kind of a high level, my story. The It's No Secret Spirituality Bites was, what several authors, guests that had been on my show, some of the things that they taught me and some of the actions that I took to make my life better. So there was that personal
Hmm.
aspect. Nature's Inspiration is kind of a little off. That I'm a amateur nature photographer, so that was kind of like
Oh,
a coffee book, picture book, and then again in the caregiving book, it was one of those things where after my sister after I got my sister's story, I realized that I kind of had to own it. I mean, there were things in there that obviously I did that are very personal, but the thing is I think it's those aspects that the reader will be able to identify with and realize that they're authentic, and that it's okay to feel like you do. And there was one other story that I had in there from a woman from New York, Maya, and her husband Joe, and Joe had a heart attack, and in an instant things had changed, for her becoming a caregiver for him, and when it came time, to have that DNR, that do not resuscitate, and she had to make some really tough decisions, and I had a personal experience with my father when he had a DNR, and his doctor had one, his wife at the president wife had one, and when it actually came time to pull it out and implement it, no one could find theirs. So I mean, it was one of those really tough decisions. But these are things that people are going through every day, and so I kind of put myself in the books. I've done that on the radio show. I tried to keep the focus on the guest. To me, if people are tuning into my show, I feel that they want to hear the guest, and I throw my input in every now and then, my perspective, but I also kind of try to keep the focus on them, and so that's kind of where it comes when I insert myself into my work.
Well, it's interesting because I really wanted to ask you this, and ever since I was on your show, I wanted to ask you this. You've been doing this for so many years, and you have in your It's No Secret book. What are some of those pieces that you've gotten from your guests that have really impacted you? Who's been really memorable in terms of your own personal growth over these last few years?
Well, one of the people that I've had on several times, his name is Dr. Amit Goswami, and he's a quantum physicist and talks about the quantum physics a lot. And now that was one of those that I had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. But reading his books and recognizing the idea of the unlimited potentiality of life is really, it surrounds us, and the idea of what comes into reality is a direct response to where we put our attention. So that particular one, I'm often, whenever life me some challenges, I sit back and recognize that, again, there is unlimited potential, unlimited possibilities, and then I just focus my attention on what it is I want to see brought into reality. So that was a big one when it comes to guiding my choices and my perspective a lot.
How have you seen those pieces of advice come to fruition in your life? Like this one you just described, how has learning from your guests really had a direct impact on your day-to-day life, much like you just described?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing is that, I really take every day as it comes, and it's really, making the most out of every day, making better choices, recognizing I have choices to make, and redirecting my attention to making, each minute count, because in many of the things that I've learned is that the people who on my show who have survived challenges or have had circumstances that you would think that who could survive after that and thrive even, is that their focus is on every day, one step at a time, taking that journey one step at a time, and that's it. So I mean, really, it's being aware that, first of all, that I have choices every day, and making better choices, and making the best of every day, again, because we just don't know if we're going to be here tomorrow.
Right. And it's interesting how a lot of this has come full circle. So you went from someone who was really to kind of hear your voice and put yourself out there to this other part of your work, which is self-publishing and public relations support. So now you've come to a point, you've come so far that you're helping other people stand in a place where they can remove those obstacles. Talk to me a little bit about that work and how you view that work on your journey of personal growth and spirituality. How does your work in self-publishing and public relations, How do you view that in that lens?
Yeah, the beauty of today's environment in self-publishing is that if you have a message that you want to get out to the world, you can. As far as a book,
Right.
The last my most recent client in that area, she had a book. Has a book called Learning to Trust that had been in her closet, for about 15 years. She had been,
Wow.
and her biggest, and she had that big fear of, if I get it out there, who will read it? Will it matter?
Right.
all of the self-judgment that we kind of place on ourselves, and I've known her for a long time, and knew that she wanted to publish. Well, she did go through the regular traditional route of trying to get a publisher to do that, and of course she didn't have an agent, and all of the kinds of things, and had all
Right.
of the rejection, and of course the rejection just kind of supported the fact that she felt that she wasn't, what she had wasn't worth publishing. But anyway, so she finally got to the point of recognizing that self-publishing was what she wanted. She knew my work very well, so we aligned, and her book was published about a month and a half ago. So, but
Wow.
and the beauty of that one is that it is in her words. I the only thing I did was as far as editing was grammatical and that kind of thing. I made sure that I did not change the tone of what she wanted to say, even though I might have said it differently.
Right.
But it wasn't my message. It was her message, and ever since then, she really is lit up. Now she told me the other day that she really can't put it into words, but she feels that she's accomplished something that many people have told her that she wasn't. And in fact, she had in her acknowledgement in the beginning, acknowledging her children for their support. And then right before publication, she changed it to her father. And she told me because her father told her when she was a young girl that she would write a book one day. And she said, you know what? She needed to honor that insight that he had way back when. So I love that, because it's everybody has a message, everybody has a book, and it's a story worth telling, period.
And we get so caught up. And I mean, if you've gone the self-publishing route or started your own publishing house, you're very familiar, and I'm sure some of my listeners are very familiar with this, the discussions of, should I self-publish, should I not? People say, go for the gold, get an agent. And it's like, well, it depends on what your goal is, right? And for some people, the goal is to get around that obstacle, share that message, and put your authentic voice in the world. And you can do that now without the backing of a major publisher. So, you can do it with a major publisher, you can do it without. So I just love the fact that you let your radio guests put their voice out there, and now you're helping those book folks put that out there. All this experience, all these things you do. So what's a tip or tool from all this experience that you can offer listeners that they can use right now when this podcast ends, something they can put to work on their journey of spiritual growth or personal development?
Well, I would say that it goes back to the choices and decisions. Is first take some time to become aware of where you spend your time every day, and recognize that there are some things that you could have done a little bit more productively, than not get off that Facebook feed, or Twitter, whatever, and actually make a choice toward achieving whatever kind of goals that you have, and it's awareness, and it's just being aware. Don't beat yourself up if you aren't always making the best choices, or if you find yourself wasting some time here and there. Just don't spend the energy on beating yourself up. We're all here to learn and adjust, and just recognize that every single day you have the opportunity to be better and to do better, and do that. And as far as the journey, don't look to be on a spiritual path, you're on it. You're on your path, whatever your path is, so your path becomes what you choose.
And I love that. And I don't think we hear enough about that. We hear about all the things that we can do, but the word choice is very empowering. And I don't think it gets enough play out there.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of times
you.
people don't think they have choices, and
Right.
and I can understand being in situations where it seems that you don't have a choice, but you do. You just kind of have to pull yourself away and, either get guidance from within or from someone else, but start recognizing you have choice. And once you realize you have a choice, then all of a sudden you have power. You have power to make a different choice.
Right. That's right. And all those discussions about empowerment is wonderful. But the precursor to that is, like you said, the recognition of choice. I think that's a very powerful message. So that brings us to the end of this episode of the Nobody Guide to Life. Thank you, Robert, so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you, J.A. I'm so happy to be your nobody today. It really made my day.
Well, it's great, and I'm sure the listeners appreciate it. And I want to remind all of you, if you have a passion, something with joy potential, explore it, follow it. Look, I know life is busy. Robert knows life is busy. We all know life is busy. I know there are things to do. I know there's jobs to get to. I know there's people to see. I know there's sleep to get. But you got to start somewhere. Take a small step. Robert airs a show 3 days a week, so start with one a month. Make a new friend. Attend one lecture. Write a few paragraphs of that book that's inside you, and then contact Robert to help you with it. It's a long road. Just take one step. I'd like to once again thank Robert Sharpe. You can find out more about his show at www.blogtalkradio.com/Bite Radio Me. The links to the show and all of his books, including Joy Potential, will be in our show notes at nobody'sview.com. And remember, you can always find out more about what we're doing at nobody'sview.com or thenobodybible.com. Or you can reach out to us on Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's View, or join the Facebook community Simple Spirituality. If you like what you hear on this podcast, please consider a review or a subscription. We'd really appreciate it. Keep practicing and have a good week.